No, I didn't think so. Probably because well, you're too young, actually. Chris Wiley is partly why we have Brexit, partly why we have Donald Trump as president. And we're going to talk a bit about some of what he was involved in, okay? But before we get to that, let's deal with this first of all. Okay, so where are we? So doing a brief recap, we've talked about communications, the imparting or exchange of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. Really what we're talking about is the successful conveying or sharing of ideas and feelings. Okay, exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions. It's a process. Okay, 1 second. It's a process by which we pass information, understanding. So it's all of these things. As I've said before, we don't want to use communication with truth. Ideally, of course, communication involves truth, but don't confuse them. We've all been lied to at different stages. We know that there are people who lie and don't tell the truth, and they put themselves across as great communicators. But we know that's not the case. So communication from a business point of view is the sharing of information between people within a business, within an enterprise, for the commercial benefit of the organization. It can also refer to how we share information to promote products and services to potential customers, which means, of course, we could talk about advertising and marketing. It is a critical business function. We said this last week as well. It's a critical business function. I don't think the importance can be overstated. If we're not communicating effectively, and we don't communicate effectively all the time, nobody does, we are, watering down to a certain extent our capability as a business. All right. We talked about the communication process. So a sender has to encode a message. So how you encode a message is important. All right. What that message is, of course, should be suitable to the person who's receiving it, and that's why you encode it in certain ways. You've got to choose the best possible channel to get that message through to the person who is the receiver, and the receiver has to decode the message. So if you think about this, very simply, I need to explain something to you. I've got to figure out how best to get to you understanding what it is I'm trying to explain. Communication, I should never review it as just a delivery mechanism. If I deliver the information and you don't understand it, it's your fault, it's not mine. That's not the way to do it. If I'm going to be effective as a communicator, I really need to think ahead in the process. Okay? So, which is why when I run these classes, I like to do a combination of some text and images and pictures. Okay, and videos, because I think it's a multifaceted approach that helps me get across and explain some key concepts that hopefully are sticking with you guys. All right, so I have to take account of the fact that you're all bilingual, right? Maybe trilingual. Is English your first language? Now you're all pretty good at it. Okay, no, but you all have a different first language, and we're communicating in English. So I know that I have to, consciously try and make sure my English is effective. Okay, so I don't try not to speak too fast, try to put in pauses, and try to allow for you guys to understand what I'm saying. Okay. And actually, it's not just English, actually. It's because, of course, I'm talking about certain subjects that, well, I'm supposed to be knowledgeable about. I'm trying to make sure that you understand the key concept that we're addressing. All right. So the channel we have is this channel. Okay. Now there are a couple of strands to this channel. There's the slides, there's the voice, and there's the camera, and we're backing it up with the WhatsApp and with the app where you can, where we're moving to we're getting closer and closer to having a much fuller version of the app. And we're also using a couple of other things. So within this internet channel. So this is our channel. I'm testing occasionally your feedback, your understanding with some of the exercises and stuff, to make sure that you're understanding and you're getting, what I need you to get. And I'm trying to counteract the noise, because there will be noise. There'll be noise here, there'll be noise there. There'll be noise in the form of disruption of the signal. There'll be noise from distractions, okay? There'll be noise from possibly channel confusion. What I see in my screen might look fractionally different in your screen, okay? So it's within that process that we're trying to communicate. Now, believe it or not, it's the same process when you're having a stand-up row with your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or your friend, okay? When you're really annoyed or they're really annoyed and they're giving out to you or you're giving out to them or you're refusing to do whatever, it's the same process, okay? It's the same process if you're going on a date, if you're meeting somebody, for the first time. It's the same process. If you're trying to make a good impression, if you're going to a job interview, it's the same process. But we generally, we subconsciously do it, but we are going through that process of recognizing that somebody that we're trying to communicate with, if we communicate well, we're really tuned into them because we're recognizing and we're learning from them continuously about what's working. We're choosing the right channel that works best for them and for the message. We're constructing a message that they can understand, and we're encoding it in a way that they'll be able to decode it. Okay? And that's what the best communicators do. Is that fair enough? Okay. Okay. I think one of the fundamental things that's underutilized in communication is the feedback loop. And because the only way to check that the message is understood if we're the sender is to seek feedback, or to include in the message the need for feedback, or to build a relationship where people aren't afraid to give us feedback. And sometimes we do that simply by asking for it, okay? But it's that idea that feedback will help us understand if the person got the message effectively or didn't, as the case may be, okay? So that's the process, and we've sort of highlighted that a couple of times. We'll actually be coming back to communications in level 4, and we'll be going into a bit more detail on some of this stuff. When we talk about business or corporate communications, these are some of the pieces we talked about. This is very much corporate communications related to stakeholders, investors, government, media relations, crisis management, dealing with issues that emerge. In the next level, we'll be talking about some of the scandals. Marketing communications with our customer base, corporate responsibility. So those are some of the corporate communications. Communication, of course, is about conveying information. So when we talk about communications in a business setting, we also have to sort of be aware of what the corporate business information is. All right. We had this the last day. We sort of broke it down between governance, which is a very particular type of reporting, an element of product specification, accounting records, and HR files. To a certain extent, are covered by regulation or by, government expectations, as well as good practice. And then there's more information which is, linked to what our day-to-day is. So our sales literature, our marketing communications, of course, our training documentation and our procedures and our processes in terms of our standard operating procedures and our business plans and strategies. These are all things that we develop ourselves and which, pretty much we have control over. Okay, we don't have outside influences necessarily. It doesn't mean that we won't take advantage of or include, but there's less structure requirements or rules around all that sort of stuff. Okay? So those are some of the types of business information. And some of the characteristics that we kind of need to bear in mind for business communication. It's a continuous process. It never ends, really. It shouldn't end. In many ways, if we're not continually communicating, we're not learning. Because remember, communication isn't just a one-way street. It has to be a two-way avenue. Okay, and in some cases it's 3 or 4 way. But when we are communicating, we may be delivering messages, but we're learning all the time, or we should be. Okay, so therefore we need to kind of understand the process, right? Effective communication can really help us get to our business objective. Okay, I think we're not talking about it now, but we will be looking at leadership in level 4 and other elements of higher level management later on. I don't think you can be an effective leader unless you're able to communicate what the objective is, unless you can build some buy-in, unless you can gain some enthusiasm. So I think you have to be able to articulate a vision. You have to be able to articulate a purpose and win buy-in to that. And if you can do that, it makes it much easier to achieve the objective. Okay? And it also means you can dispel some misunderstandings. Let's set the record straight here. This is not the issue. This is the issue. Okay? And we see that in different cases. We saw with the Apollo 13 thing, where the deal is, it's the oxygen level. Okay? We did that Apollo 13, didn't we, in this class? Or was it the other class? Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Communication, of course, is pervasive in nature. It affects everything every day. All right. So within our learning program, we've had to talk about understanding different types of business communication, which we've done. We've talked a bit about how to present information effectively. We've done part that we're looping around that, but we have talked about different types of corporate communication. And I suppose one of the things we will do next week is we will look at some examples of that as well. So we talked about identified number of pieces. We'll look at a few examples. We are going to talk about the legal and ethical issues today, okay, in relation to the use of business information. And some of that will involve electronic and non-electronic methods, which we will also wrap up in the next session. All right. So that's what we're about. That's where we're at. So our focus today primarily will be on legal and ethical issues. We're going to deal with the homework now and one other piece, and then we'll get into it. Why would we be concerned with legal and ethical issues? What are ethical issues? So, we need to kind of understand a bit about that. And we're going to look at data protection, which is links to the electronic stuff. But it also it brings us into being able to deal with some legal and ethical issues in relation to that, because we're going to talk about breaches. Okay? So let's first of all just look at the homework. Now, so what I asked you to do was to choose a business with which you're familiar. Okay, Nicholas, no worries. Okay, Priscilla. Choose a business with which you are familiar. Complete the following table to clarify communications and processes involved. So with a business, we might talk about closing a sale, hiring a new employee, dealing with the product design flaw, or securing an investment for the business. Okay, and really what I want to do is try and look at what might go wrong with such a scenario. Okay, so let me pick somebody's homework. Second. Okay, so let's look at Prasad. I couldn't actually open yours. Let me just see, can I download it first of all? I can't open yours, Prasad. I'll have to look at it again. Who else? Priscilla and Nick. Faith. I have yours, Faith. Yeah, I see this beer. I just can't open it. I look at it, but I can't do it right now. Okay, so let me share the screen. And so what you have here is okay. Can you all read that? Yeah, Nick, I saw that. Okay, so this is what you sent me, Nick. This was around the sender message, etc. Faith, this is what you sent me. Choosing a business which you're familiar. Complete the table to clarify communication process involved. So closing a sale. So the obvious person is, yeah, the team member who's present at the show and tell. Very good. Very impressed, Faith, about show and tell. It could, of course, be on the phone too, right? But there's somebody who's trying to close the deal, okay? What do they do to complete the task? They will set up a show and tell of their product and then ask for model to test their products, okay, potentially, if it's fashion, okay. It could, if it's online, it could be, doing a demonstration online and doing something like this communication and actually having communication with somebody and showing them a product or how to do it. So the same thing can apply. It's show and tell. How does the communication occur? They set up the table with the products and displaying, and then they take the customer through it. So it could be makeup. It could be like a food thing in a supermarket. When should it occur? During the show and tell and after the show and tell. Yeah, I mean, let's think about what should actually happen here is if you're trying to close a sale, you're trying to get across to the customer what the benefits of the product are. In reality, sales is very much a two-way process because you're listening to what the customer is saying, what they're asking about, and trying to understand what's actually important to them and explaining how the product addresses that issue. It's not just saying this is the product, it does this, this is a mug, it does this, it holds liquids, it has a handle broken off so you can hold it with two hands and blah blah blah. Of course that's not effective. So in a conversation, well, what are you looking for? You're looking for something that will hold a hot liquid. Okay, well, we have this mug here. It's kind of insulated, it has a handle and etc. So it's understanding what the customer is, what their customer needed. So it's actually not just talking, it's listening to, asking questions and listening. So the customer gets a chance to try the product, etc. Yeah, so that's good. Okay. What could go wrong with the sales? Trying to close a sale. What do you think? How to stop? Could be, yeah. I'm selling you something and then we turn around and realize I haven't got it. Okay. What else can go wrong? What if there's a complete mismatch in understanding? So, for example, have you ever been in a store and you're looking at a watch or something and you think it's really nice and you ask the storekeeper, can you try it on? And you put it on, it looks great and everything else. That's really good. And the salesperson is trying to sell you the watch and so on, and product shown and given. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second, Faith. The salesperson trying to sell the watch, and then you ask how much the price is, and the price is $1,000. And there's a serious issue because, of course, the customer, of course, thought it was $50. So it's just not going to happen. Like, it's that mismatch about understanding what the product is and what the value is. Now, of course, you don't start straight out with the price, but the salesperson should be trying to understand what the person is looking for and do they have a range, okay, a price range that they're looking to look within, okay. Another example, fade shield, product shown in given stock is not the same. That's right. I'm trying to show you this and sell you this product, and actually you're looking for something totally different. Or I'm selling you this, and when we go to it, that the actual product that you're buying or you think you're buying is something completely different. So there are errors like that. Those errors are not in the English or the language we use. The errors occur because of understanding, because we create the wrong understanding, because we gain the wrong understanding, because we don't listen effectively, or we don't see. I mean, the best salespeople are reading the customer all the time. You know, they're seeing what the customer is really looking at or buying into. I think sometimes the best way to see this is in when somebody's buying a high-priced product. So if it's a car or if it's a piece of jewelry. And I've watched this happen in jewelry stores where, you know, somebody's looking at engagement rings, for example, and they like this and they're looking at this and they keep coming back to, you know, one or two. That's going to be, I can't afford it. Can I just see it again? And, oh, that's really nice. And it just fits on my finger. And what about that one? And we go back to this again. Now, I'm a salesman. I know that this is what they want. Okay, so, you know, once I'm getting that sense, my next challenge is, well, how do I help them buy that product? How can I work with them on price? Can I, you know, address some of their concerns? So I have to understand what those things are. So I should be reading the customer. Consider terms and conditions, of course, is another thing where, you know, some salespeople get bogged down in terms and conditions and, you know, and they're going into the weeds in some of the details. I'm not saying they're not important. They are important, particularly for banking and finance products. But trying to get that understanding across is difficult. Let's take another. Let's say dealing with the product design flaw, the customer service and the production team. Okay, that's a good example. So who's involved in communication around the product design flaw? Well, yeah, you know, the customer service people are the ones who are going to hear from the customer when the product doesn't work. Okay, or it could be from the QA department or the showroom people, or the, you know, the salesperson might come back and say, but it has to include the production team. You know, somebody has to find the problem and then communicate it back. What do they do to complete the task? Well, you're going to check on the product and give an exchange of the product. If the product is faulty, of course we're going to replace it, or it could be refund the money. Okay, which is a completely lost sale. Okay. How does communication occur? Through email or phone call? Yeah, or in person. Could be in person too, right? But normally you're starting off at a negative straight away because the customer has got to do something that they didn't want to do, that they didn't expect to have to do. So they've got to raise the issue. This doesn't work. And now I've had to come back here and I'm annoyed. I've had to, you know, drive into town again, park my car, pay the car parking charge, and come back to your stop because this product that I bought off of you doesn't work. What are you going to do about it? Okay, an irate customer. Okay. Or, of course, it could be on the phone. It could be the same conversation on the phone. When should it occur? When there's a feedback about the product flaw. Yeah, so when the customer has a problem, I think there's an opportunity here. If we realize our product has a flaw, what if we went and told the customer? What if we contacted the customer and said, look, we're really, really sorry. You bought this product with us last week. We're really sorry to tell you that there's a problem with the product. We're going to need to replace it. Okay? Or we're going to need to repair it. Now, on the one hand, of course, it's a problem for the customer and they might be a little bit annoyed. But the very fact that we're proactive and we step forward in the process will gain us some brownie points, won't they? It'll help us as well. And why is it important? A poor customer service can give, a good customer service can give reassurance to the customer. Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. So, you know, I think that sort of encapsulates for me one of the key things here with communications. Communications is an opportunity to build a relationship at every point. It's an opportunity to fix something that's gone wrong. It's an opportunity to demonstrate who we are, what we're about, what we value, why we think you're important as a customer, why you're important as a staff member, why we want to work with you as a supplier. It's an opportunity. And the better we communicate, the more proactive we are in that, the better relationship we build up with our customers. You know, so yeah, and this is, I mean, have you guys had some experiences like that where actually, you know, somebody steps forward voluntarily to communicate something with you about a product or a service, and you know what happens is you probably actually give a little more credence to what they say. You rely a bit more on what they say because they're demonstrating honesty and integrity. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Prasad, Prasad, you did send it to me, so my apologies. For some reason, I couldn't open it. I may have to do something like download it and open it that way. I'll try that afterwards. Where is my thing? Here we go. And Nick, you can send me on the homework if you get a chance. And Priscilla, I look at it if you send it on to me. What do I want to share? Oh, here we go. Back to the slides. No, it's not that one, sorry. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Let's, I think we talked about, so, no, actually, let me ask this question. Okay. So, because we didn't do this exercise before, sure we didn't? Prasad, a good question. Do you need human resource department in hiring a new employee? That's a good question. Do we need the human resource department? Thank you, Priscilla. Do we need human resource department in hiring a new employee? What do you think? I think the first answer to that question is it depends. Okay. As Priscilla says, it depends on the company if they have that department. It depends if they need a department. It depends on how big the organization is. If you're a sole trader, you're not going to have a human resource department. If you're a small company, you may not have a human resource department. I actually think as well, I wouldn't outsource to a human resource department internally in the company necessarily either. If somebody's going to be joining my team, I'd want to be involved in that process. Doesn't mean I couldn't benefit from advice and input from a human resource team or professional, but it depends really, because ultimately it is all about people. It is all, well, I don't care what business or activity you're involved in. It's about people. It's how you engage with people to do this job or to do that job or to make this product or to sell that product or to buy from us or to supply from us. It's all about people. So I don't actually like human resources as a term or as a department. I kind of buy into the thinking of a guy called Ricardo Semler, whose view is that that's all we do. Why would we outsource it to an internal department? Managing our people is all that we do. Yeah, I mean, that's another point, Priscilla, too. If you found somebody, they can refer to the new employee directed to human resources. Yeah, or you know what? In a really progressive organization, sometimes you just hire somebody. That's it. Like if we found somebody we think they're really good, okay, maybe there's a couple of processes we have to go through, but we're going to hire them. Let those guys look after the process, such as reference checks or so on. So it depends is the short answer. Okay, just before we get into the legal and ethical stuff, I want to talk about this question for just a couple of minutes. So if taking over a business, what information do we need to know? So I want a whiteboard. Okay. Oh, sorry, that's something I want. Okay. So what information do you think we need to know? Now, can I give you guys control of the whiteboard? Okay, so 1 second. We had this problem before, don't we? I think I can't unless I restart, which I don't want to do. Oh no, it's there, yeah. Okay. So okay, so if you move your cursor, can you type here? So Priscilla, you're saying financial statement. Can you guys where is my whiteboard? Here we go. No? Okay. All right. So Priscilla, you're saying financial statement. So the question is, if we're taking over a business, what do we need to know? We need to know financial statement. Why do we need to know financial statements? Okay, so we need to know about the financial position. You're right. So about the debt position, about the cash position, about sales and costs, about profits. Okay, sales records, absolutely, sales and costs, sales records. In fact, let's just make that a separate line. Costs. Anything else? Expenses, so costs and expenses, yeah. So costs, we might talk about direct costs and overheads / expenses. Yes, Prasad, good. And Faith, yes. So in addition to financial statements, we also need to know other information. We need to know about staff. Okay, we need to know about the customer base. So actually, I'm going to stick with staff here for the minute. I'll come back to the customer base in a second. So we need to know staff. We need to know who, what skills. Okay, we need to know conditions that they've agreed or contracts that they're on. In reality, what skills really means capability. What can they actually achieve? Okay. Established employees, yes. Salaries, the cost base, the cost of staffing. Okay, that's really good. Okay. Separately, of course, yes, you know, we also, you said we need to know about the customers, about the market. So the customer base, the customer needs. Okay. Customer likes, dislikes. Where are they? How do they communicate, etc. Okay. Want. What do they want? What do they want? What do they want? / need. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Customer needs and wants. That's really what it should be. Yeah. Anything else? So the finances, the staffing, the market, the stakeholders, such as shareholders. Okay, you're right, such as suppliers. We've talked about customers, so it might be, and we talked about staff, so it might be government. Okay. Another piece might be operations, mightn't it? So what do we do? What and how? Okay. I might talk about distribution. We might talk about quality. We might talk about research and development. Okay. So when we get into it, what we can see, if we're taking on a business, is a whole range of information, and that's not all by any means. But if you think, what you're doing is you're thinking through and you're coming up with ideas, and you're all right, and there'll be more as well. So the challenge is, what we want to do is we want to know how the business works, how well it's doing, what it could do in the future, where it might go, what's going on around the business. So it's all of that sort of stuff. So when we talk about business information, these are elements of business information that we might want if we were going to take over the business. Okay, happy enough? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that and drop it onto the WhatsApp so you have it. I mean, it'll be on the replay, obviously, but yeah, that's in the right zone. Okay, all right. So let's go back to the slide and then get into the legal and ethical issues. Okay. All right. So we've covered that off. Okay. So let's skip on. There's a guy called Edward Orr Murrow, who we will talk about in the next level as well. He was a newsman in the US, and particularly in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. A man of high integrity. He talked about the speed of communications is wondrous to behold. It's also true that speed can multiply the distribution of information that we know to be untrue. What is he saying? What he's really saying is that if we tell a lie, it gets around really fast. Okay? The speed of communication is really, really fast. If we tell something that we know to be untrue, it doesn't slow down. Speed works against us in that situation. Speed can get that information out, can distribute it just as fastly if it's untrue as if it's true. And that sort of brings a question up for me. You know, what are the ethical and legal implications when we think about communications? Look, we can all make mistakes. Mistakes happen, and that's okay. That's part of development. But deliberate mistakes, misleading people, misleading the customers, misleading the government. Now we're into legal and ethical issues. Okay, and there's a difference between legal and ethical, by the way. Legal has specific consequences. Breaking the rules means you're liable to end up in court, or to be judged, or to be fined or something. Ethics is a bit different. They may well go hand in hand. I mean, you know, breaking the law in certain cases is certainly unethical. There may be other things that we can do that it's not necessarily breaking a legal requirement, but there is a question as to whether or not we should really do it. So we want to try and look at communications from the point of view of what we shouldn't be doing and what shouldn't happen. Okay. Now, I think we gave you this the last day, didn't I? You can all see, you're right, Priscilla, there may be a gray area. And when we talk about ethics, the thing with gray areas is, how do you view a gray area? Do you view a gray area as an opportunity? Or do you view a gray area as something that you kind of want to get out of? You want to be in a clearer situation, a black and white situation. What do you think? If it's an opportunity, are you looking for a way to bend the rules? Are you looking for a way to get around a problem? So you're right, it is a gray area, but I think that raises a question for how we respond to that gray area. Does that, do you understand what I mean? And I think that this is a discussion that businesses have to have now, in every country. Like, you know, with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with other issues, with climate change, you know, we shouldn't just be paying lip service to this stuff. We need to ask ourselves hard questions and say, well, okay, what can we do? What should we do here? Okay. So in some sense, yes, there may be a difference between an ethical range and a legal issues. Some people will look for those gray areas and look to survive in them. I think that's possibly a dangerous attitude or a less progressive attitude. Anyway, let's move on. The reason I had this on screen is, tell me what you see. Lady, okay. Old or young? Okay. Okay, good, Prasad. Priscilla? So the left side of an old lady or the left side of a young lady? Seems young. Faith? Nick? Young lady, okay. Nick? Okay, so you all see the young girl. Good, that's good. There's a right and a wrong answer here. No, sorry, beg your pardon. There's no right or wrong answer. There are both. Yes, looking at this, you're looking at the left cheek of a young lady looking away, or you might see the nose and the face, the left front face of an older lady looking this way. Okay, it's one of those trick things. Okay, the thing is that there are two views here, so you got to make it. Do you see both sides? Do you see one side? Do you make a decision? And in many ways, this is a microcosm of what we're dealing with. It's partly to do with perception, and partly it's to do with what we see, and do we trust our eyesight to a certain extent? Do we trust our interpretation? So when we talk about information and we talk about communications, one of the first things we've got to distinguish is between data and information. Okay, data is raw, unrecognized, unorganized facts that need to be processed. And you know, we see that we can have lots of data, but it's when we process it and we create information that we start to see insight. We start to see important findings within the data. Okay, so there's this confusion first of all. You know, we've got all of this information. Well, what does it actually mean? Well, let's process it, and then we can work something out. So we can find some trends, etc. But the other thing is, when we look at communications, we have to delve into the realm of integrity and truth. You know, so in our organizational environments, you know, in our core operations, taking inputs and processing them, creating outputs, and liaising with customers and staff and competitors and management and bankers and government and unions and regulators and all that sort of stuff. We have to sort of bear in mind the ethical issue, right? There's a legal requirement, which is usually fairly clear. It's yes or it's no. And then there's how do we interact with everybody? What, you know, how do we bring our integrity to bear? Do we put our integrity at risk by choosing, you know, certain options? So that's what we're concerned about. So Chris Wiley was involved with a company called Cambridge Analytica. Right? And Cambridge Analytica was all about data processing. Cambridge Analytica was central to the misinformation and the hacking is not the word, but the manipulation of social media in the run-up to the 2016 election in the US. You know, planting stories and basically shaping opinions on the election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So in itself, it wasn't necessarily illegal, but they were using Facebook, they were profiling the electorate. And they did the same thing with the Brexit referendum in the UK. They were profiling the electorate and, you know, really working through all the different data sets, not just young or old or male or female, you know, looking at lots of different parameters and really micro-focusing down into the electorate and what they termed micro-targeting. So what they were doing is they started developing ads and posts, not just advertisements, but posts, and creating accounts and pushing the message, shaping the agenda, and really focusing in sending in, you know, messages and posts and ads to different people, you know, lots and lots of different versions to different categories of people, all designed to try and shape the agenda, shape the debate. And they played a huge role in helping win the election for Donald Trump in terms of painting Hillary Clinton into a corner. Now, in some ways, and I'm not totally clear on this, in some ways they may have been using hacked data from Facebook. And this was where, you know, partly the issue arises. So Christopher Wiley, this guy here, worked for Cambridge Analytica. They were bankrolled by, you know, somebody in the US, possibly by somebody in Russia. And I think he became a whistleblower. So he sort of said, well, this is what we did, folks. Okay. And he came out and he told his story. Right? Why is this important? Because not to do with Cambridge Analytica and Chris Wiley now. Business owners generally are concerned with legal, ethical, and operational issues, in particular in relation to business information. Okay. And in that's the reality. In your assignment, however, you're going to be asked to, would you like to provide an overview? And would you like is you will be required to provide an overview of the issues and constraints which are involved in the legal, ethical, and operational issues around business information. Legal and ethical issues have come up all over the place. Boeing, Enron, Ford, Facebook, Twitter, lots of other examples. I can't think off the top of my head right now. Facebook is particularly important. Like Facebook is in the news a lot at the moment, and Twitter. Partly not because of what they themselves do, but because of what they're allowing happen on their platforms. So hate speech, Trump tweeting this or retweeting that or sending this message and are propagating false information or misleading facts, you know, to try and help his election campaign. And not just Trump, other people do it as well. So there are legal and ethical issues around this. And, you know, we're not going to get through all of these by any means, but they're certainly worth starting to consider. Now, the legal stuff might be around defamation, information privacy, misrepresentation, even false reporting, data protection, freedom of information. So there's lots of legal issues, and there are also ethical issues. Who owns information? What are we doing with that information? How are we using it? Are we using it for good purposes? Are we using it for nefarious purposes? Are we using it illegally? And it's not just information. You know, what are we doing? What did we do? What have we done? Should we be owning up to stuff? Are we trying to hide stuff? Is the business hiding things that it shouldn't hide? Is the business trying to cover up something? So we may have whistleblowers as well. So do you know what a whistleblower is? Spreading rumors, okay, or a wake-up call, okay. That's quite interesting. Spreading rumors, not so much. A whistleblower, okay, so I don't know what the actual textbook definition of a whistleblower is. A whistleblower is somebody who goes public with information about something that's happened. Okay, so in some ways they could be spreading rumors if they're going public with the wrong information. If they're going public and throwing out stuff that's actually not true. Most whistleblowers are going public or reporting on something bad their organization has done, or something bad that an individual has done, or they have been part of, and they're really not comfortable with. So a whistleblower, and whistleblowing is a very difficult space to be in, because what it is what you're really doing is you're saying, hold on a second, my organization did something really bad, okay? And I'm telling you about it. So my organization are going to fire me. They may sue me. It's unlikely I'll ever work in the industry again, because who's going to trust me? But my conscience is making me do this, because this isn't right. And I don't want to end up on the wrong side of this, and I don't want to end up in jail if and when this stuff comes to light. Okay? So in many ways, that's what a whistleblower might be. Now, a whistleblower, there's nothing to say that a whistleblower comes out and reports on something that's completely untrue. That could happen too. But in the main, it's quite a serious consequence for somebody, both emotionally and professionally. So they might be in danger. You're right. They might be in danger. I'm going to skip ahead a couple of slides and show this slide here. So these are all whistleblowers. Okay. This guy here, top left, is Edward Snowden. So he was the CIA analyst that basically stole a whole lot of secrets from the American intelligence agency and gave them to WikiLeaks. That became WikiLeaks, basically. Okay. He is still alive. He lives in Russia right now because he can't live anywhere else because there's a warrant out for his arrest. Okay. So he'll be arrested and tried for treason if he ever returns to the US. He might be arrested and extradited from other countries where he won't be extradited from Russia. Okay. This lady down here is dead. Her name was Karen Silkwood, I think. And there was a movie about her starring Meryl Streep, and she blew the whistle on a nuclear power plant where there was leakage happening, and it would appear she was killed when she was run off the road. Nobody actually knows, but she died in a car crash, being run off the road. And the suspicion was that this was something that the company did to try and shut her up. This guy is still alive. His name is Frank Serpico, and he blew the whistle. He was a police officer, and he blew the whistle about corruption in the New York police force in the 70s. So there's a movie about him, Serpico. He's played by Al Pacino in the movie. So he's an ex-cop who, so he blew the whistle. He stayed on the force, so that can't have been easy with them. This lady resigned from Oxfam about 18 months ago. Oxfam, there was a scandal. Oxfam is a big UK charity. It's a multi-national UK charity. They raise money and they help out in very impoverished regions where there's poverty and there's famine. And she resigned because there was a scandal involving sexual abuse by people who were working in Oxfam in the communities where they were trying to provide services. So, people in a position of power were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And basically she resigned, not because of that, but because the company didn't act when they found out about it, that they didn't do what they should have done. She was brought in to be sort of the safeguarding person to sort of lead them through this ethical maze and to introduce training so that people would behave better, etc. And she resigned because the company's managers weren't buying into it. And she said, look, there's no point. I mean, I'm just a figurehead. They're not actually doing what they should be doing to clean this up. This guy down here is Jeffrey Wigand. So he's a very famous whistleblower. There's a great movie called The Insider. Jeffrey Wigand was a scientist, and he was working for Brown and Williamson Tobacco. So he's working for a tobacco company. In the 1990s, he blew the whistle under great risk, financial and to be sued and everything else. Yes, they do have to sacrifice a loss. No, Priscilla. He blew the whistle, basically going on the record and saying that cigarettes were addictive, that the tobacco companies had suppressed the research for decades because they wanted to sell cigarettes, but that cigarettes were carcinogenic and they were addictive. And that what the tobacco companies had said was a lie, basically. So he was ostracized by the tobacco companies, and he ended up becoming a teacher. It was the only job he could get. So these are all whistleblowers. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. And, you know, there's always a great story to tell with whistleblowers, but certainly Jeffrey Wigand, this lady, I've forgotten her name, and Karen Silkwood certainly, you know, acted on moral grounds. Okay, as did actually Frank Serpico. Sorry, it's Frank Serpico too. Edward Snowden. I mean, I don't know. The jury is still out to a certain extent on that one for me. You know, was he committing treason or not? But on the other hand, you know, what he exposed is lots of bad practices in the CIA. So I think that's quite, you know, important as well. So the point here is that these are all whistleblowers, okay? And they suffer as a consequence. You know, they have to do certain things that, you know, and they're supposed to be protected by legislation, but actually, you know, the companies that are employing them don't like to have their whistle blown. So it's, I think it's an important thing, Prasad. You know, we would hope that we would all do the right thing when push comes to shove, but people come under fierce pressure. And it can have consequences, you know. So I think it has consequences for people in the organization. It has consequences for people who feel the pressure to do a whistle, to blow a whistle. But if there's something going wrong, then, you know, there is an element of an imperative there that, you know, we need to address what's happening. We need to, you know, we need to fix something. And that's the challenge. You know, the problem is you get bite back. Okay. Yeah, very much it's on somebody's conscience. I think, you know, it's not so much, yes, it is up to the person's individual conscience, absolutely. But it's not an easy road, which is why, you know, we talk about legal and ethical issues, why it's important to recognize that they are there. And good companies don't have a problem putting in whistleblower protections. They don't have a problem in doing the right thing, partly because they're not doing something unethical. It's the companies that get themselves in trouble that really try to close it down. And then, of course, you're just doing more bad things to try and cover up other bad things. So when we talk about legal and ethical issues, there's legal and there's ethical, okay? Data protection is a particular area that I sort of highlight because it's easy in some ways to talk about it. There's the Data Protection Act 1998. Like we talked about some of the acts under the recruitment and selection piece. We talked about some of those protections. So there can be unethical behaviors there that, you know, could arise to issues. We talk about data protection. It's interesting to talk about data protection because it's rooted in the idea that your personal data is yours. Your name, your social security number, your bank account, your address, your phone number, your medical history, your personal information is your personal information, and you're entitled to make a decision on whether or not it becomes public or not somebody else. That's the idea behind data protection. And when we talk about things like GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation here in Europe, that's designed to protect your rights to your information. And companies that breach those rights do run into problems, okay? So, you know, information should be obtained fairly and lawfully. A company shouldn't have information on you unless you've given it to them willingly. Now, maybe you needed to give it to them to get something out of them, in which case you've got a choice to make. Do you want what they have or not? And if you do, well, you have to be willing to give some information to deal with that. So, you know, that's a trade-off, and you can do that, and they're entitled to ask for that in certain situations. So the information is obtained fairly and lawfully. It's used only for the purposes that it was collected for. It's maintained accurately and up to date. It's not kept by organizations for longer than is necessary, etc., etc. There's a number of other elements within data protection, and we'll revisit this again. I'm going to skip this slide for now because we're up against time. I'm going to skip GDPR because we'll talk about it again. But there are a number of elements to this which I'll touch on next week. But ultimately, when we talk about ethics, okay, legal is one thing, ethics is another. And sometimes they cross over. We talk about business and ethical considerations, you know, respecting human rights, do no harm, be fair, to communicate honestly. These are factors that should underpin our communications. Should underpin our communications. If they don't, we have a problem. Okay? And where the legal and ethical collide sometimes is in, like this case with Facebook. In 2018, Facebook announced an attack on its computer network exposing the personal data of over 50 million users. Hackers were able to gain access by exploiting a vulnerability, and they were able to steal access tokens, which mean they could take over users' accounts and gain access to other services. Okay? So for 50 million users, they were able to get a whole load of information and get into people's accounts. Okay? And it topped off the fallout from the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which was Chris Wiley that I mentioned earlier. So as a result of this, you know, and this is the point, there may have been previous hacks of Facebook, accessing all this information meant that companies like Facebook, Cambridge Analytica and others were able to create databases, to profile people, to create messages, to influence and shape the agenda of an election. That's the issue. Actually, the European data, under European rules, the country whose data, the country where the data breach occurs is responsible for investigating this. Facebook's European arm is based in Dublin, in Ireland. So therefore, it's the Irish Data Protection Commission that has to deal with this issue. And this could lead to a fine of 1.63 billion. So there's a couple of these cases going on at the moment. So that's an example of Facebook. Another example of Cathay Pacific, personal data of 9.4 million passengers was exposed, access to passport numbers, identity card numbers, credit cards, etc. Okay, so lots of information. The problem wasn't that there was a breach, because, you know, this was an attack on the organization. The problem for Cathay Pacific was it took them 7 months to report the breach. And that's where we have the intersection between ethics and legal. So legal, something happens, they're supposed to do something very quickly, but they waited 7 months because they were trying to cover it up, which means, was there an ethical breach? Okay, so does that make sense? Or does that, you know, give you some clarity around the legal and ethical? Okay, all right. I'm going to leave it there for today because we're up against time. We're actually going over a bit, and my apologies. It's quite a complex area in some ways. I don't have any homework for you right now. I will send you a question after the class, and it's going to be around this legal versus ethical piece, more just to get you thinking about it more than anything else. Priscilla, what if legal is against a person's ethics? See, this is one of the challenges, Priscilla, and this is kind of what I wanted the question to be about. And there have been cases where people have made a stand. Do you know who Muhammad Ali is? Do you know who Muhammad Ali? Why can't I? Yes, the boxer, Muhammad Ali. I'm trying to type his name in here, but I can't for some reason. So let me stop the share. Chats. So Muhammad Ali, he's dead now. Muhammad Ali is a famous boxer, first 3-time world heavyweight champion. His original name was Cassius Clay, but he converted to Islam and changed to Muhammad Ali. A really wonderful character. He took a stand against the Vietnam War. So he was American, he was going to be drafted, and he decided, I'm not going to fight. I don't believe in this war. So he became a conscientious objector. And as a result, he lost 5 years of his boxing career. And he went, you know, he went to court, and it took 5 years. But in that situation, so he had a legal obligation under the draft, and he said, no, my ethics are against this. I am a pacifist. He was a boxer though. I'm a pacifist. I'm not going to war. So I refuse to be drafted. So we'll pick up on that. I'll send you a question on this, and then we'll pick up on this next week. But that is right against, goes right to your question, Priscilla, about legal versus ethical. Okay, is that fair enough? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much, and I will see you on Friday for recruitment and selection. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Stay safe.